From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thanks for joining us tonight, and this is what we have on the program. No retreat. Tens of thousands of protesters stand up to China and bring Hong Kong to a standstill. Targeting rescuers, Italy slaps NGOs with punishing fines for bringing rescued migrants to Italian ports. President Merkel, while Emmanuel Macron says he would support Angela Merkel for EU Commission President. Bad behavior, governments and an HBO drama target tourists who misbehave at European hotspots. And dummy politics, American presidential hopefuls trade insults in tonight's Raw Moment. All right, it is time to meet our panelists this evening. Joining us tonight, Brian Maguire. He's a journalist and broadcaster at Erected. Brian, what are you watching closely tonight?
President Merkel. This is something I wanted to see on the agenda for a long time, and now it's happening.
Big question mark. Are we going to see her back? All right, Ana Gomez is joining us as well. She's a Portuguese MEP from the Socialists and Democrats group. Hi, Ana. What story are you watching tonight?
Well, the Hong Kong protesters, of course. I think it's an existential question for Hong Kong, and nobody knows what's going to happen.
Absolutely, massive protests. And also joining us, Katalin Scher. She's an Hungarian MEP-elect from the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats group. What about you, Katalin?
Well, as somebody who also smelled the tear gas in the Budapest protest earlier this year, I'm also interested in hearing about the Hong Kong protests.
Absolutely. Okay, that's exactly where we are beginning tonight, because with escalating protests in Hong Kong, where tens of thousands of people took to the streets for a second day, and protesters blocked roads and erected barricades around government buildings. Police responded with tear gas and rubber bullets. The demonstration is against a new extradition bill, which would allow people to be sent to mainland China for trial. And critics say those accused could face torture, arbitrary detentions, or forced confessions. Now, in response, the government has promised legally binding safeguards, and these are the largest rallies in Hong Kong since it was handed back to China in 1997. Now, NBC News correspondent Janice Makifreya, she is on the ground and she is joining us now live from there. Janice, can you just tell us what is happening? What have you seen? And what is the mood like right now?
Well, the mood turned rather sharply today, Tessa. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We were down around the legislative buildings where thousands of protesters had surrounded the building because the government was supposed to be debating this very controversial extradition bill. At about 4 o'clock, it changed very quickly. The riot police started to move down the street. They were beating on their shields with their batons, and then that's when the tear gas started. And this continued for hours, this cycle of firing tear gas. They used rubber bullets, water cannons to try to push protesters back. And they warned them. They said, you need to clear this area or, quote, you might regret it. So it seemed to be in 100-meter increments that the protesters were being pushed back until they were over an overpass. Then it seemed to be a standstill. The crowds are thinner. There aren't as many protesters as there were earlier in the day, but this is more of a core group willing to get into confrontation with the police. So far, officials say about 22 people were injured today. Tessa?
All right, Janice, I mean, this is reminiscent of the protests in 2014, and we're seeing, you know, the violence again, the tear gas on the street. Has the government reacted to what they've been seeing on the streets as this continues, and what are we expecting moving forward now?
Well, it's good that you draw that contrast with the 2014 protests because certainly in terms of size and dynamic, there are a lot of similarities. The difference that I noticed today was that the police seem to have a much lower tolerance. There is a much tighter room for dissent here, and there was much more tear gas that was fired as compared to the protests in 2014. For the Hong Kong government part, they are saying that this was an organized riot. The police commissioner is calling it that. So is Carrie Lam, Hong Kong's chief executive. She is also unapologetic, saying she has no guilty conscience over this new extradition law, which has obviously drawn so much opposition. She said the chaos today was heartbreaking, but this bill will go ahead. They are planning to vote on it by the end of next week. And given the battlefield that was Hong Kong today, it is not going to be one that passes quietly. Tessa?
All right, thank you for that. NBC correspondent Janice Mackey-Freyer there talking to us from Hong Kong. And we have, Guy Verhofstadt, the leader of the Liberal group in the European Parliament. He has praised the protests in Hong Kong, and he went on Twitter to say, quote, inspirational scenes in Hong Kong as thousands make a stand for their human rights and the rule of law. Europe is watching. Okay, so joining us to talk about this, we have our panelists today. But first of all, before we get to that, our team in the Cube, they have been reaching out to protesters in Hong Kong. And we'll get to those reactions a little later on. When Mackie was talking about the violence that she's seeing on the street, I drew the parallel to the 2014 protest. Does it feel any different now, Brian, when we're looking from here? Because things have changed politically as well. Is there a difference now?
I think in a wider context, things have changed even more than is apparent perhaps in Hong Kong. China is under a lot of pressure from a lot of different regions and because of socioeconomic struggles as well as ethnic struggles as well. And the human rights crackdown in mainland China has been strong. So far, there's been some hesitancy to send in the Chinese military. When that happens, it'll be game over. So this is something which is a much tighter, more critical moment. You saw the tolerance, as the commentator described, the journalist described, is narrower than it was before. So I think that they must be under intense pressure. The executive in Hong Kong must be under intense pressure to deliver this quickly because this risks spreading across into mainland China as well.
So how volatile is the situation? As you're saying, spreading to mainland China. China is very jittery right now because it's, there's a trade war, a headache that it has to deal with. And also in Hong Kong, there have been arrests since 2014. And so there is more tension. So how volatile is this?
I think it's pretty volatile, and we must as well recognize, as Brian was saying, that China's been hardening. It's not the first time that China goes back into from its commitments when the status of Hong Kong was passed and the one country, two systems model was enacted. Since then, a lot of promises to Hong Kongers, including the universal suffrage, have been violated.
They backtracked on it,
backtracked. And I think that for the people of Hong Kong, this toughness that we see now in the demonstrations, it's because the people have the sense this is existential for Hong Kong. I mean, the rule of law is what actually makes Hong Kong attractive, and it's the name of its prosperity. Even for the tycoons of China that use Hong Kong as the entry point into the world financial system.
What's really interesting is that the big businesses are a bit quiet right now. The small businesses are participating.
Big businesses always are quiet.
Sure.
They expect the people to do that, but this is existential for the people, but it's existential also for business. And I can imagine that in the framework of this trade war, Hong Kong could be even more asphyxiated, and Europe cannot just be watching.
Well, exactly what I want to put to Katalin. So Verhofstadt said Europe is watching, but what is Europe doing, or what can it do?
Well, I think it's very essential to Europe to have its voice when human rights are being violated anywhere in the world. We have to take action, we have to step up, we have to raise our voice. But also what I need to put to consideration is the case of Britain, who were actually the signatories of that treaty in 1997 that would actually guarantee 50 years of independence of Hong Kong. And I really see this new legislation going into the direction of putting legislation in the hands of China that could be very questionable. Yeah, so I would really like to see some strong reaction from the side of Britain on that.
Well, Britain's too weak.
Yeah. So what, I mean, realistically, what can he do? But first of all, Chris Patten, the last governor of Hong Kong, he did say that this is the worst thing that happened in Hong Kong since 1997. So what can Europe do realistically? You say stand up for human rights, but can they really? I mean,
no,
the dependence on China, economic dependence on China?
In May, they sent a démarche, a political, diplomatic telegram complaining about this, and that's as much as is going to happen. What's Europe going to do against China with trade? In the middle of a trade discussion, which is not just with China, but it's attached to America now as well. They can't do anything. They're afraid of that. We could have spoken up about our human rights, and we don't. We hide behind the curtains, hoping that nobody raises awkward questions. The chance of you getting a press conference with the president of China at the same time doesn't happen. They don't want to listen. This is an echo chamber within China, and they really don't care what the Europeans think.
But that's where the European Parliament could probably make a difference, because exactly speaking up about human rights and the rule of law will annoy enormously the regime in Beijing and will indeed show support for the people who are fighting
But can
for...
they risk it? Can they risk it in light of the trade negotiations that's
to,
going
but
on?
also-
Can they?
They have to.
That's why
trade-
we have to make
Sure,
a
Our
point.
trade deals, European trade deals are supposed to be attached to ethical considerations. They're
Is
not
that happening?
enforceable.
Is that happening
it's
enough,
Not yet.
though?
It's not yet happening.
Consumers can make the choices here. Consumers can decide what they're going to buy,
Yeah.
and they can boycott Chinese goods. If you see that kind of action, maybe the Chinese pay
Well,
attention.
but I think we have to be mindful that we represent 500 million European citizens, consumers. It's a strong market, and we have to make a strong point when it comes to the deals we make on behalf of these people. And at this election, it was very clear that these voters voted for human rights, for European values, and we as parliamentarians, we have to represent it. And every day of our practice in our office, when it also comes to trade deals, we have to put that on the
That's
table.
always an interesting question on when do you raise human rights in light of these traders and if it is happening enough. All right, we've seen those pictures, and as I was mentioning earlier, we will be bringing you stories of the protesters who were out in the streets in Hong Kong, and our team in the Cube have been reaching out to them. And Alex Morgan is joining us now with more on that side of the story. Alex.
Well, Tessa, we can put this on a map for you, perhaps. This is Snap Map. It's a map that's developed by Snapchat, the social media platform. It shows you where people are active on social media. And look at this, right in the heart of Hong Kong. This heat, this area here, shows you where people are posting from. And this is right in between two districts, one of which is the Central District. If you like, it's the beating heart of the administrative centre. And look what people are posting. People on the ground, people there in Hong Kong are posting what they are seeing. These aren't news pictures. These are the pictures that people might catch with their phones. You and I might catch if we were there. This is a real window into what is going on there. I can tap through, as anybody can on this platform, just to see what people there are showing. Now, this is all going on here. There's a lot of activity. So who are these people? Who is using this? Who's there? Well, we reached out to some of them, and Oscar, he is one of those there. Oscar is a theatre playwright and a director. He spoke to Matthew from my team here in the Cube, who's in constant contact with people on the ground. And Oscar explained to us in a short video why he's there, but also what he's been seeing. This is what he told me.
We don't trust the Chinese government. In this afternoon, around 16:30 Hong Kong time, the police was just crazy, and a lot of protesters got injured. Luckily, I'm still safe. I hope I will stay fine. I personally can't figure out a reason why a government would have to pass a law against so many of her citizens. I would like to tell them we will not give up.
We will not give up. And in fact, that is what we were getting on social media, on Snapchat. People posting captions, never surrender. Oscar here saying that he doesn't understand why the Hong Kong authorities are going ahead with this. What's going on? He says he's seen them injured, but it's worth saying at the moment, he's still telling us he's fine, but he's saying we're not going to back down. I'm not going to back down. Oscar's not the only one. He also spoke to Elsie, and she gave us this video again from in the heart of things in Hong Kong. And you can see, look at this. This is what it's like to be in the crowds. The tear gas is flowing. You can see the canisters when they're fired in just a moment. They fly over here. And this is what it was like in that crowd. You can catch the moments of panic that people had afterwards. This is what it is like to be at the heart of these demonstrations. We're also seeing from a student called Harry. He sent us these pictures showing even as night fell, look at this, clouds of tear gas, but people still there. Now, this is obviously the defiant message from the protesters, but it is worth saying the authorities have had their say on this. The police chief has said, OK, you can have your say, but these demonstrations, he says, are putting innocent people at risk. Now, of course, demonstrators disagree with that, but it's important to say the authorities have come out to say officers and innocent people, in fact, the demonstrators themselves, are being put in danger. The authorities clearly not backing down. People like Oscar saying, we're never going to back down. Other people saying never surrender. You can see this is going to remain a very tense time, a very tense debate in Hong Kong, Tessa.
Indeed. Thank you for that, Alex, and our team in the Cube. Just echoing what the protester was saying. So I was there in 2014, and, that's my hometown. And he was saying that he doesn't understand why the government is doing this. So the government said that it's clearly just really for legal issues, crime, etc. No one is buying that. No one is buying that. No one that we've spoken to. But there are two sides to each story. Where do you think is the turning point, really quickly, on this story, where it will turn?
When there's bloodshed and when the Hong Kong police lose control and they send in the Chinese military. The Chinese military go in, you can say goodbye to human rights in Hong Kong. That'll be the
So that is a line. So that is a line.
Yeah, Macau as well. So it's interesting with the comments there about innocent people at risk. The police officer says this. This extradition law puts innocent people at risk. People forced confessions, people tortured, people locked away and never seen again as well. That's what's at risk, and that's why they're so resolute.
And there's a death penalty. And we have an interdiction to extradite people for countries that still have the death penalty. Full stop.
For me, the turning point was when this legislation was signed in place.
Okay.
So it's not afterwards, but when it happened.
And clearly, when we look at the protest pictures on the street or the protesters, it seems like this will be continuing. That's the feeling that people are getting. Okay, now in politics closer to home here, there's more fallout from the European elections as the horse trading for the next Commission president continues, and one political party is having a makeover. Here is today's edition of After the Vote. From rainy Brussels to sunny San Sebastian, Europe's next leader is the talk of this Spanish town today, as Parliament's biggest grouping, the European People's Party, descends for its so-called study days. Specifically, they're studying how to get their lead candidate Manfred Weber installed as the next Commission president.
So please take your seats.
But there are other names in the frame to step into Jean-Claude Juncker's shoes, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who got a high-profile backer last night.
Pourquoi pas même une Angela Merkel? Le voudrait-elle? Je la soutiendrai. Pas sûr. Vous la soutiendriez? Ah bien sûr, parce que je pense qu'il faut quelqu'un de fort.
And back in Brussels, a rebrand. Guy Verhofstadt's Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe is teaming up with Emmanuel Macron's En Marche, and they're on the search for a new name. On the shortlist, as revealed by Politico, Inspire, Renew, and Inspire Europe. What's in a name, after all? Actually, on that note, there is a name. So we have you, Kathleen, to tell us, because you are in the group. So what is the name?
Yes, well, I'm happy to represent European citizens in the Renew Europe group that really shows the dedication of our new group to reforms.
Renew Europe.
Renew
so there
Europe.
you go.
That's a statement, I think. That's not only a name, but it's a mission for us in the next 5 years.
Best of luck.
Best of luck, it goes.
Do you like it? Yeah, I think it's a great
Exactly.
name.
Well, there you go. We're going to be hearing a lot more of Renew Europe. I want to talk about Emmanuel Macron's backing Angela Merkel there. I mean, what signal is this sending? Is this for real?
I got a text from a number of people about 7 o'clock this morning with screenshots of this saying game over. And you can see clearly from that interview as well, this is a placed question. This was something which they were supposed to ask. His response was entirely...
So you think he knows something we don't know yet?
I heard a number of different people in the last few days saying, including from the German car industry, saying that they really expected Merkel to be the Commission president. And this was something I said when Manfred Weber was announced as the Spitzencandidate. He looked like a placeholder, someone who would step back at the last moment and allow Angela Merkel or another person to step in.
That's Brian's crystal ball. Let's see if you get it there. What do you
She will
think?
get what she wants, either president of the Commission or president of the Council. She will get what she wants. And
What does she want? Because she said, oh,
people say that she doesn't want none of those places.
But it's important.
It would be important for Europe if she would have
that's
wanted.
what I wanted to know.
Because she has a lot to make up for the mess of the last year.
But how important is it for Europe to have someone like Angela Merkel at the helm of one of the institutions?
Well, I think it would be the most important to have somebody there who really wants this job, because this is not a job that's like being thrown at people, but this is one of the most important positions in Europe. So I would like to hear her opinion on that. On this note, Renew Europe has a brilliant female leader up for candidacy, Margrethe Vestager.
Well, there you go. There's
recommend
competition.
her very much.
And when you say when you say to clean up the mess at Angela Merkel, I mean, not that she did, but
it's the policies that were wrong, that alienated the citizens, that did not deliver on the expectations and the aspirations and the principles and values of the EU.
So does she have clout?
All these neoliberal policies.
She has immense clout. Nobody else has clout like Merkel. The other thing which people tend to
despite all the criticism she saw.
Well, the criticism, we criticize her from outside Germany, but inside Germany, she's been there for a long time and kept a very stable economy and a very stable country. She listens to public opinion. And if she was in the Commission as well, we shouldn't expect a German chancellor in in the Commission, we should expect a senior politician with clout who listens.
Who is a true European?
Okay.
Who's truly European.
But I am yet to hear her confirmation on that. And
There's competition coming from this side on that. So Emmanuel Macron, watch out. Okay. Well, while Emmanuel Macron's been busy focusing on the EU's next big leader, his friendships across the pond might just be suffering from a little neglect. So let's take a look.
We do have a very special relationship. In fact, I'll get that little piece of dandruff off.
In early 2018, the relationship was in full bloom. A peck on the cheek, a pat on the knee. France and America's leaders thought each other perfect.
We have to make him perfect. He is perfect.
And what better way to cement that budding bromance than an oak tree? A gift from Emmanuel Macron from a World War I battleground, and a reminder, he said, of the, quote, ties that bind us. But strict quarantine rules meant the symbolic sapling was soon whisked away, a process which reports suggest it didn't survive. And onlookers were quick to respond, hinting that the tree, much like their friendship, had failed to take root. With the leaders at loggerheads in recent months over their conflicting political positions on everything from climate change to the future of Western democracy.
C'est ça ce qui est en train de se passer dans nos démocraties. C'est ce qui fait que certains sont attirés par l'autoritarisme, qui semble plus efficace pour protéger des menaces venant de l'extérieur et qui dit la démocratie ne vous protège plus contre les inégalités de ce capitalisme devenu fou. Nous, on va vous protéger, on va fermer les frontières, faire des murs, sortir du multilatéralisme.
But despite the recent thorny patch, the French president promised a new tree will soon be in the post. So will that next tree survive, much like the relationship? Will it get better? What do you think?
Well, plant more trees. That's good for the planet. You can never predict Trump, but you can predict trees helping our planet to be more healthy. So plant more trees.
As simple, do you think?
Well, in terms of tree disasters in Washington, it's not the worst. The Japanese emperor sent a whole bunch of cherry trees, but they came with cherry tree plague as well, and they all died. So this is one tree, and I don't think anybody expects this bromance to last much longer.
So you think it represents their bromance? The state of their bromance. All right. Okay, so we have a lot more coming up for you on the program. How much tourism is too much? Why some European governments are cracking down on badly behaving out-of-towners. Plus, Italy targets migrant rescue ships with fines. We'll speak to a search and rescue expert about what this means for NGOs. That's up next. Welcome back to the program. Now, Italy continues its crackdown on migration with some controversial new measures. The government passed an emergency decree last night, and it limits the entry of ships into Italian waters and targets NGOs with fines if they dock in the country without authorization. The rescue groups say it's an attack on those conducting missions in the Mediterranean. Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini says it's a step forward for security.
In questo decreto si prevede la confisca del mezzo per coloro che ripetutamente non ottempereranno alle convenzioni e ai divieti di ingressi previsti nelle acque territoriali dall'articolo 1, multa da 10 a 50.000 euro per il comandante, l'armatore e il proprietario delle navi che non ottempereranno alle indicazioni della Guardia Costiera, della Finanza e delle capitanerie.
Okay, joining us to discuss this is Giorgia Linardi, a migration and a search and rescue expert with the NGO Sea-Watch. Thanks very much for joining us there, Giorgia. So, Italy has toughened its stance on migrant rescues for some time now, but how is this new measure, this new decree, going to affect the way you do your work?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So the consequences of the new decree, well, we'll have to see. Actually, what we have to keep in mind is that the decree refers to Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea that discusses the concept and principle of inoffensive passage of any ship into the territorial waters of a coastal state. In order for this passage to be offensive, you need to represent a threat to national order and peace. And this is something that has to be ascertained. I would be quite surprised if a judge would define the entry of a ship that has rescued people in distress and received no indication of a place of safety according to the law where to deliver these people as a threat to the national peace and security of Italy. And if any of these rescue ships will be approaching Italy, that will be because Italy is the closest safe port to the position where the rescue occurred. Even in the case where there is a coordination by the Libyan authorities, it is important to be reminded that Libya does not qualify as a safe place where to disembark anyone rescued in international waters.
Georgia, will you continue your work regardless if this decree does pass?
Well, as a matter of fact, we have carried out a rescue a few hours ago, and we have at the moment 52 people on board, including 7 women and 2 babies. And we are awaiting for coordination and the indication of a place of safety where to bring these people.
Okay, but do you acknowledge the Italian government's concerns at the presence of rescue boats there ready to help people from, as you say, but it is a pull factor, the government says, for smugglers. Do you acknowledge this security concern from the Italian government?
So actually, it has been demonstrated by statistics as well as by the facts reported by the UNHCR, the United Nations Agencies for Refugees, that rescue boats do not represent a pull factor. We have witnessed in the past weeks that thousands of people have departed from Libya without any presence of rescue ship at sea. So there is no correlation between the presence of NGOs at sea and the departures of people from Libya. Mm-hmm. And we acknowledge, of course, the law decree issued by the Ministry of Interior. However, I think that this is a reaction under the name of security to what is actually the unwillingness and inability to deal with the management of migration and the management of a phenomenon that is a part of our present history and should be share with the other member states of the European Union.
All right, thank you very much for joining us, Giorgia Linardi there from the NGO Sea-Watch. Okay, now joining me in the studio to discuss more on this is Brando Benifei, Italian MEP from the Socialists and Democrats group.
Hi, hello.
We also have Beatriz Becerra, Spanish MEP from the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats group, and still with us, Catalina Che, Hungarian MEP-elect, also with the ALDE group. Okay, so first of all, just to follow on the last question I asked Giorgia there, when it comes to smugglers and the Italian government's concerns, the pull factor, one study says, no, it isn't, but then you have others saying, well, there are a lot of migrants who do pay smugglers to come here. I mean, of course, we see the stories on both sides. What is your answer to that Italian government's concern?
My opinion is that this law only builds another piece of a puzzle of extremist responses to real issues, and it's really a racist way of dealing with the topic by creating this big fine for people saving.
So it's nothing to do with smuggling for you. It's nothing to do with security.
I think it's not solving an existing issue that is the smuggling of people. I think it's true that there is this fact, but this law is made only to build a propaganda and a continuous emergency atmosphere to build on a consensus based on this, on fear and on inability to solve the real problems. And who would ever vote for the League and for Salvini if these issues are solved? So its strategy is not to solve anything. And the point is that in the end, it's Europe that has been failing in these years and creating the conditions for Salvini to say and do these horrible things. So it's also responsibility for Europe now to build a real migration management policy.
Okay, for the sake of balance here, I bring up the smuggling part because this is, it happens. It happens.
It's a fact, but
sure. Okay, so Beatrice,
right
what is your opinion on this decree? Can it hold? Can it be legally challenged? And what is it? What impact is it going to have?
Of course, we have to fight the smugglers, but the way to do it is not fining NGOs. The way to fight smugglers is right where they are and where they have the business, which is in the countries of origin. First of all, that. And I don't think that this reason behind the decree of the Italians is ending with the migration problem. The only thing behind this is that they do not want to end with this problem. It's just what you said, that this populist, nationalist government really wants to take this to win votes. It's the only way behind this. And they are using the migration problem or crisis or threat or challenge, whatever we want to call it, as a way to use people on their own benefit. And this is not acceptable.
Is it significant that they watered down this decree and in the beginning, it was explicitly said that this is to target migrant rescue boats, and then they took out any mention of migrants. Is that significant?
Well, I think the real problem is what you mentioned. It's not about the text, but it's about the practice that happens. And it's about this problem that Europe still doesn't have a common European border and coast guard in place. So that's what we need to fix. And of course, this is Salvini's
So this is Europe's fault?
Well, it's a problem that we have to face in the next 5 years. That we have
the Council, as usual.
Yeah, not Europe. Europe, what is Europe?
What is
so
Europe?
It's the government's problem that we have not
Dublin regulation reform has been
exactly.
stopped by the Council after the Parliament has approved it. It's the Council the problem of this Europe, unable to find agreement between themselves and to accept the fact that they have to agree with us. They don't want to agree with the Parliament.
And even fulfilling the commitments, because they have not...
They sign conclusions that are forgot the day after.
So, but there are like heads
That's
of states...
the problem of Europe
There
today.
are heads of states who are like very aggressively campaigning on this issue back in their home countries, but do not do anything on the European level to solve it.
European level,
Mr. Orban, my Prime Minister.
Well, you're taking on the next, Parliament. The 5-year plan of the EU has migration at the top of the agenda.
But until now, this is blah, blah, blah. No. It's a game. It's something to sell to the voters. But concretely, they didn't do enough at all. And the Parliament can testimony it. We have approved a lot of proposals, also coming from the European Commission, that tried to move the things, and they stayed not applied or even not approved.
So do you think if the EU passes all your suggestions on having border boats, patrols who are patrolling the Mediterranean, do you think that will stop people like Salvini or the rhetoric that people like Salvini, leaders like Salvini have, and stop them from doing this?
I think it will reduce immediately the contraposition that has been artificially built between those coming and those people that in Europe still think that they don't have enough from the European Union, from their governments. They are building on fear from people that have also other problems that need to be solved.
But valid arguments.
Yeah,
valid
concerns,
valid
but
concerns,
this
valid
has been
fears.
used in a way that is fueling fear and hatred between people and not solving their problems.
Well, I think that it's very hard and almost impossible to stop these populists from campaigning with issues like that. But the best medicine against that is action and concrete solutions offered by the European institutions.
And to make it very clear that the solution for that has to be necessarily European. It's a joint solution with joint funds, because the funds have to be European, the influence has to be European, and the policies have to be European. This is the only way to fight this nationalism, which is using the migration issue as a way to deal with local votes.
And if Mr. Orban and Mr. Salvini and his likes would be genuinely interested in solving this issue, they would be the first on board to sign up for a joint European action.
They don't want to solve them, otherwise who would vote for them?
Exactly, it's just like Farage. It's just like Farage and Brexit. It's the way of being.
Migration still clearly is such a massive European problem with no clear solution in sight. Okay, we have a lot more coming up on Raw Politics. Is Europe in a state of over-tourism? From out-of-control pub crawls in Rome to Instagram selfies in Chernobyl, badly behaved tourists are being called out. That debate is next.
All of the good we did, it doesn't matter.
Welcome back to Raw Politics. So that was a clip from a new television series documenting the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. And it's taken the world by storm. And as a result, the numbers of tourists heading to Ukraine has skyrocketed. But not everyone is pleased by this, because responding to a flood of selfies, some considered to be tasteless, the writer of the series took to Twitter to say, quote, "It's wonderful that Chernobyl has inspired a wave of tourism to the zone of exclusion. But if you visit, please remember that a terrible tragedy occurred there. So comport yourselves with respect for all who suffered and sacrificed." So that was coming from the producer of that series. So Ukraine isn't the only European country seeing a spike in tourism, and subsequent warnings that we see it exasperated at holidaymakers' repeated frolicking in the Trevi Fountain, for example. Rome's new mayor has introduced bans for tourists behaving badly. And elsewhere in Italy, there were protests following a crash between a cruise ship and a smaller boat. Onlookers calling it a scene from a disaster movie. And in May, workers at the Louvre in Paris went on strike in protest to the, quote, "increasingly aggressive crowds." And in Dubrovnik, the Game of Thrones series saw a 53% increase in tourists. And now back with us to discuss this topic is Brian McGuire, journalist and broadcaster from Erected. Beatriz Becerra is still with us, Spanish MEP with the Liberals and Democrats group, and Ana Gomez, Portuguese MEP with the Socialists and Democrats. Okay, let's start with the series, the Chernobyl series, that created a lot of interest. And in places like these where tragedies have happened, I mean, there's a lot of question about appropriate behavior and, tourists going to these places to experience what happened, to learn more. But then there's the flip side, isn't there?
There is a flip side, but find me a big tourist destination in Europe that doesn't have a tragic history. Rome, the Colosseum, hundreds of thousands of slaves died during the construction, and
good point.
And every street in Rome where people were burned to death. Or, it doesn't really matter where the place is, but the point is, it's about municipal management. Jobs come first for these places. Remember, the exclusion in Chernobyl meant that the industry, the economy there has collapsed. Bringing people to this place is a good thing. Let's do it in a way which is sensible and sustainable. That's the issue.
Yeah. What is the issue for you? Is it over tourism? Is it the way people are behaving, comporting themselves? What is it?
Well, over tourism, not just overcrowding, but also the exhaustion of resources.
Right.
I mean, water, the impact in the environment, the impact in the gentrification of the cities. I mean, look, I'm from Lisbon. I love, and we, of course, appreciate very much. We just have had another award for the tourism in Portugal, but and Lisbon in particular. But I fear that we could go the same way as Barcelona with the impact and the negative. So the question of sustainability is really essential.
How do you
it
do
needs
that?
regulation.
Okay, because you're talking about the sheer number of tourists, and here in Europe, cheap flights, a lot of easy accommodation that we can get. This is going to encourage a lot more tourism. So how? What do you do? Do you just tell people, can you not travel that much, or can you? What do you do?
It's a price factor.
How do you
have to price this
So it's
in.
pricing. Okay.
Yeah, no, but I think that we have to accept and understand that if we are facing a problem with over-tourism, it's because this is a symptom of prosperity.
Yes.
So this is something that we have to assume.
Which is a good thing.
It's a good thing, and sometimes, of course, there are problems arising in terms of what is the quality of the neighborhood of the people living in the cities, and how is the security and the environment and so on. But regarding issues like the one you are mentioning on Chernobyl, it's a question of education. So again, we go again. Looking at the education, that we need to balance the education of the people that is able to travel everywhere, and also how the local institutions, the local governments are able.
Because, for instance, if you allow, for instance, the gentrification of cities like Lisbon now, it won't be genuine. Therefore, it won't be attractive anymore.
But what is genuine, though? It's the first thing is people complain when they don't have jobs. Portugal is a good example, a country that was decimated by the economic crisis.
Yeah,
the money comes. This is like an export industry.
Yeah, but
people bring the cash in.
It has to be measured, and I think we need data.
It has to be managed. It has to be managed by local institutions
and regulated. I mean, if you allow Airbnb, for instance, I'm not against Airbnb, but if Airbnb is going to have an impact in gentrifying the population of the city, then it doesn't.
Okay,
it may not be so interesting anymore.
I have a question about the culture of travel these days, because we were talking about, Instagram, and this has changed the way people travel and what they want to do in the places they travel. We saw some people doing yoga poses in Auschwitz or in Berlin, the memorials, and the fact that Instagram is here, or apps like that, or the way people see travel has changed. Should we not be adapting and just changing the way we deal with tourism as a whole?
Let's see how many people do yoga poses at these places.
Or whatever for Instagram's sake.
It would be a very small proportion of people. Most people have a sense of dignity and sense of history when they go to these places. And I think you're right. An education part of this, the municipality, the airline industry as well, could do a lot in terms of education. I don't think these are huge steps, and people respect, but they need to be told.
Okay. And how the local institutions and whoever is dealing with this, the management of the tourism, how they also train the professionals that are around, so the guides and how it's the people who is welcoming. I remember last year I was visiting Hiroshima also, and I can say that this memorial of Hiroshima, you couldn't find anybody doing stupid things on that, because the whole surrounding, how everybody's going with you in a very easy and warm, in order for you to learn about this experience, and it's much more fruitful.
And just a last question on pricing up. Would this mean that we should end cheap flights?
No, I think you price it in. For example, Venice is a clear zone, and I would have no problem with paying an entrance fee onto the historic centre of Venice. I think they need it apart from anything else. You can do this in different ways. You can have a tax on food. You can have a tax on, and the risk is that.
Why not aviation, actually?
Well, why tax?
But anyway,
people?
it's a big.
But that may not be the final destination of people going there. Okay, so you're going to flying into Barcelona, but maybe you're going off to the Basque Country, something like that. To tax it at the point of hotels, for example, those people are clearly staying there.
So there you go. So that's a suggestion, is pricing up to deal with the so-called over-tourism that we're seeing across Europe.
We need data.
Okay.
We need data.
Well, coming up on the program, we want to hear from you on this topic. Join us, because we want to know how much tourism is too much. Your call is coming up at 7 p.m. Brussels time, just after the show. The contact information is on your screen. You can call us at 00800 3333 7002 and join the debate. As always, use the hashtag #RawPolitics. Our lines are opening soon after the break.
Should Scotland leave the UK, in fact, instead of leaving the EU?
I think Scotland should leave. Yeah, definitely. I know it's science fiction, but basically, so is Brexit.
The reality is that Scotland is a very particular case with this Brexit situation.
Basically, it's just Barnier and Juncker just trying to make mischief for the United Kingdom.
No, not at all. Political cartoons are part of our culture.
That specific cartoon was fairly offensive.
A good cartoon is a cartoon that makes you feel like a punch in the face.
Welcome back to the program. So those were last night's highlights on Your Call, and we are doing it all over again tonight. Same time, 7 p.m. Brussels time and 6 p.m. if you are in London. And hosting tonight is our correspondent, Jack Parrick. And joining him later is Brian McGuire from Erected. And still with us is Hungarian MEP-elect Katalin She. Okay, 3 questions, as always. Jack, what are we talking about tonight? Asking people to call in about?
That's it. We want people to call in this evening on the 3 questions. Take a look at what we're going to be talking about. It's like a scene from the movies. A 66,000-ton cruise ship slams into a Venice quay. It sparked an angry backlash against tourism in the ancient and crumbling lagoon city. And it comes as Rome cracks down, with new rules to rein in public bathing and out-of-control pub crawls. And thanks to this popular new series, the disaster-hit city of Chernobyl has become a tourist hotspot, with Instagram influencers being slammed for trying to capture the perfect selfie in the city, where thousands lost their lives. So we're asking, how much tourism is too much? Standoff in the Mediterranean. More than 80,000 people have signed a petition to support a German boat captain who's facing prison in Italy for rescuing migrants, accused of aiding illegal immigration. This as the Italian government plans to fine NGOs up to €50,000 per mission.
In questo decreto si prevede la confisca del mezzo per coloro che ripetutamente non ottempereranno alle convenzioni e ai divieti di ingressi previsti nelle acque territoriali dall'articolo 1.
Humanitarian groups say they're saving lives, while others say they're providing business for smugglers. But what do you think? NGO boats saving lives or aiding smugglers? And the so-called Queen of Europe is a woman of many talents. Angela Merkel studied quantum chemistry and worked in scientific research before venturing into politics as a spokesperson, then being elected to the Bundestag before becoming German Chancellor. Now France's Emmanuel Macron says he would support her becoming the next European Commission president. She doesn't step down until 2021. But what should Angela Merkel's next job be? Come on, Europe, have your say. How much tourism is too much? NGO boats saving lives or aiding smugglers? And what should Angela Merkel's next job be? And you can phone us for free on 00 800 333 3702. Send us an email to rawpol@euronews.com. And on social media, use the hashtag #RawPolitics. You can also search for us on Skype, where we can take your calls, and we can also see your face if you open up the video.
We always like that. We do like that, don't we? Indeed. Okay, so let's talk about Angela Merkel. I mean, to be great, she's done a lot of things. She's a scientist as well. What could her next job be? I mean, I know we talk about institutions, but what else could Angela Merkel be doing? I mean, that's really...
In the Brussels rumour mill, with all of these top jobs up for grabs, I have heard her suggested for pretty much every single position so far, and she's ruled herself out of the European Commission presidency.
What about something else, like a professor? I don't know, a scientist? What could she do?
From some German journalists that the deal with her husband, who was a professor also, was that when she was done as Chancellor, they were going to go to the United States, where he was going to teach, and I would assume that she would continue teaching in some form there as well.
I'd love for her to be my professor.
Yeah.
That would be so...
I would love her to be the head of the Commission. That would be another... I think we'd all learn something in that case.
Well, I think she would have some interesting knowledge to pass on to the future generations of politicians, and that's actually a very interesting balance when what her husband wants.
Exactly. I mean, I think she could walk into pretty much any position.
Yeah,
Could she? I don't know.
Work at Starbucks.
Work in Starbucks. Angela Merkel. Okay. Now, for tonight's Raw Moment, this is coming from the White House lawn, where it seems that Donald Trump has one eye on the 2020 election and one potential challenger in particular. Let's take a look at this.
Well, I heard Biden, who's a loser. I mean, look, Joe never got more than 1%. No, I'd rather run against, I think, Biden than anybody. I think he's the weakest mentally. And I like running against people that are weak mentally. I think Joe is the weakest up here. Joe Biden thought that China was not a competitor of ours. Joe Biden is a dummy.
Okay, quick comment on that Donald Trump comment there.
Classic Trump.
It is a self-description.
Yeah.
What about? Are we watching the United States race closely? What do you guys think? Just
Kamala
quickly
Harris.
on Kamala Harris, the Democrat contender.
I think in the end she has the character, the intellect, and the personality to drive this all the way to the end.
Interesting. And what about you, Jack? What do you think?
I think that the Democrats, I mean, Kamala Harris is the one that's coming out strongest. Beto O'Rourke has the sort of support of Beyonce, doesn't he?
Hipster chic, like.
I don't know. I was very inspired by Bernie when he first ran, and I really hope that he can inspire conversation around his topics in this race also.
My friends in the US seem to think he's sort of running out of steam in this big
Like he had his
Democratic
big
race.
chance back then, and probably not now. You don't think so? You think he's still got the draw?
I think he has a fair good chance also, but I'm also a fan of Buttigieg, so...
yeah, he does speak a lot of language. I was watching all those...
European-style politicians.
European style. There you go.
Elizabeth Warren has very good policy.
Well, there you go.
So I'm open to being...
We can talk about American politics as well here. Okay, thank you so much for watching us tonight. Remember, we would like to hear your views, so stick around for your call after this program. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics, and we're waiting to hear from you. Thank you for watching us.